Welcome to Outside Sales Talk, where we meet with industry experts to learn the strategies and tactics that make them successful. I'm your host, Steve Benson, and I've helped thousands of salespeople all over the world crush their quota. Today, I'll help you crush yours. Welcome to Outside Sales Talk. Today, I've got George Brontén with us today, and we're going to be talking about the 3 deadly assumptions that are killing your B2B sales. Welcome to the show, George.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So by way of introduction, George is the CEO and founder of Membrane.com. It's a SaaS company that enables B2B sales teams to execute their sales processes, coach for higher results, and build predictable growth. He has the job title of Sales Effectiveness Pioneer. His mission is to learn from top salespeople how technology is either hurting or helping sales productivity. He's also the author of the book, Stop Killing Deals, How to Gain Competitive Advantage by Viewing Sales Through the Lens of Human Nature. Super interesting. So George, first question, what are the 3 deadly assumptions that are killing deals and harming sales organizations?
Yeah, the 3 ones that I think are hurting sales a lot are 1, that perception or assumption that salespeople are born. So you either have it or you don't. I made that assumption in my previous company before I became a sales nerd and sort of dedicated to this mission of elevating the sales profession. I thought that salespeople were just, they came to the world as talkative, energized, very extrovert, social people who could talk their way to a deal. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that I assumed that salespeople were somehow super disciplined, right? They would just go after the target that I set for them and do anything that was needed to just make it happen. And 3, the idea that human beings, both buyers and sellers, are rational. Logical, rational creatures, which we're not. So those are the 3 that I sort of write about in the book. There are, of course, a lot of others, but I think those are the ones that I find causes us to make so many bad decisions when it comes to hiring salespeople, helping salespeople, or not helping salespeople, and growing a business.
And how can salespeople identify the presence of the assumption about salespeople being born, not made in their organization? How can you tell that that deadly assumption is floating around?
Yeah, I mean, the symptoms are pretty obvious. You see a lot of turnover because the people hiring the salespeople or the sales leaders have this assumption. So they look at the CVs, they hire for previous performance, and they assume that, okay, if they did well at another employer, at another company, they ought to be successful in our company. That's one dangerous assumption that is tied to that. So you see people coming into the company not getting the support they need to really succeed. So they churn, and then you blame the person or the recruiter, saying, we got the wrong person. But really what you did, you weren't really helping that person to succeed in your environment, or you hired the wrong type of person with the wrong type of skill set to your environment that made it not work.
And what should you be doing instead? How can a company or sales leadership cultivate top performers and do it right?
Yeah, I mean, all of this started for me when I sort of came to the realization that I was making these faulty decisions or incorrect decisions based on my faulty assumptions. So I believe that the leaders have to sort of get the insight that maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe it's not the people that are the problem. Maybe we don't have what's needed for my people or people to succeed. there is also a lot of change happening in the market and in the world. Competition is tougher. The internet turned everything on its head when it comes to research and all that. So you also have to really know your customers. So a lot of this is oftentimes, it can also be the case that you're looking for people who succeeded in the past, but based on how your customers have changed and your offerings may have changed, you need a different way of selling than you previously had.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to support the top performers, you first have to understand what is required to be a top performer. And that can be very different, of course. If you have a fast-paced sale, you can close a deal in 2 weeks, selling a low-ticket item, you're selling to one person. That type of sales team needs a quite different support than an organization selling highly complex software solutions with services taking 18 months to close, and you have to involve, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different departments, a lot of different people. So first realize who you're selling to, how they are buying, how you should be selling, and based on that, which people do you need and how do you need to support them. So I think you have to really do that exercise before you start figuring out how to support your people.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think another very closely related mistake is when you're hiring, thinking and you're hiring for someone's past successes. They were successful in a different type of environment, or with a different type of sales cycle, or with a different type
Mm-hmm.
of price point, or different type of customer, and you assume that success is going to translate to your organization.
Yeah.
um, any one of those variables could really matter, or could not matter, just depending on the situation. But if you just because someone was a top salesperson of selling a very long sales cycle, very expensive item, that maybe involved a lot of whining and dining and a lot of executive touch, etc., that does not mean they're going to be so they could sell $2 million of stuff a year that with 5 sales. That doesn't mean that that they would do well in an environment where they're supposed to sell the same $2 million, but with 2,000 small sales, right? A very high velocity environment with an average selling price of $1,000. That's a very different person and a very different skill set to be successful in those environments. And so just because they've got, hey, I made 120% of quota over here, doesn't mean they're going to do well with you. And it's those
Yeah,
assumptions
exactly.
can get you in trouble.
Definitely, I agree 100%. I think, and one of the problems in the sales space, if you read books or listen to podcasts or read blogs, is that it sometimes can sound like selling is selling, right? It's all the
Mm-hmm.
same. It's all about closing the sale, making the number, sure, but the how to do that, it can be completely different, like you just described.
Yeah.
So that's a very important insight. And if you're a bigger company, you might be mix and matching these, right? You can have a team selling to the SMB market, higher volume, quicker paced environment than the enterprises. So
Mm-hmm.
you have then 2 completely different sales processes, uh, and probably broken into sub processes, etc. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but a lot of people want to have or get a shortcut. Like technology is a perfect example. There's a lot of technology out there promising to automate stuff with the newest AI or coolest algorithm,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be great in a B2C or a highly transactional B2B environment, or in the early funnel SDR stage perhaps, but it could also be detrimental in pursuing a high stake deal, right? Then you can start killing relationships if you use technology in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the book is also talking a bit about, the importance of humans, right? We can't automate everything. So the human aspect is so important, so critical to
Mm-hmm.
understand. Like discipline, I mentioned discipline is one of those that we believe somehow that if we just give a salesperson a target to reach, they will figure everything out. They will have the willpower to do everything that is needed. But we haven't really spent time as a manager or coach to really get under the skin of each individual to understand what drives this person. Why do they wake up in the morning? Why do they come to work? What, why is money important, or is money even important for this person? All those soft things are so important, but are sometimes forgotten in sort of with these assumptions lying around, like, okay, they're all money motivated, they're all heavy hitters and competitive, blah, blah, blah. All these things might not be true
Hmm.
and have to be questioned.
Well, yeah, and that's the big the second deadly assumption is that people assume salespeople are disciplined. How does how specifically does that assumption kill deals?
Now, maybe it doesn't specifically kill deals, but I think it kills performance, because if you assume that is the case, you're not giving them the support they need to be disciplined.
And
And
how should you do that? What's the what would you say do you need to do to get around this lack of natural discipline or this assumption that everyone is naturally disciplined? How can you actually solve that in your organization as a sales team?
yeah, I think it comes down to this individual ambition and motivation. What drives an individual? Why are they there? What do they want to contribute with? What do they want to in life? I mean, get really under the skin of each individual to know what drives them. Because discipline and willpower is really about not doing something that is pleasant in the short term to gain something in the long run, right? And that's tough for human beings are not good at that at all. In general, we have to really work on that. So there needs to be something important at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, for each individual in order to be disciplined and have that willpower. And if you don't understand what drives each individual and you think it's just about throwing money at them, it's not going to work. And then they might not exercise discipline for those reasons.
So
And
you help
that's gonna,
salespeople attain discipline by understanding their motivations and then motivating them.
yeah, and it's like everything, right? If you want to exercise, everyone knows you should eat healthy and exercise.
Hmm.
But doing it is a different thing, right? Because it's much nicer to go and have a snack and not
I love
exercise.
snacks.
Yeah, me too. Then after then, when your waistline starts growing, you don't like it as much, and then you're motivated to do something about it. So yeah, I think it's finding the motivation. Why should I give up something that is, I could be surfing the internet and just doing something fun instead of cold calling or whatever it might be that might be painful right now, but has a long-term effect and benefit.
Mhm. So the third deadly assumption that kills B2B sales is non-logical decision making. Tell me about
Mm.
how does non-logical decision making impact both buyers and sellers, and how does that kill sales?
Yeah, and I think this is very obvious for everyone in sales when you're working on a deal and everything is perfect, right? They need it. They've told you they need it. They have money to buy it, and in the end they don't buy it, and you don't. It's like what happened? It's completely logical. The rational choice is to get this. We've done the ROIs. Everyone was on board, but people aren't rational, right? And I think in sales it's so obvious that there's so much emotions and egos at stake and consensus that needs to happen that never happens. And we have to, as sellers, realize that this is just the way it is. People don't make decisions based on logic alone. They mainly make decisions on emotions, and then they rationalize that with logic afterwards. So it's not enough to sort of show the facts and the numbers and the rational side of this. And the same goes for managers managing a sales team, it's also not enough. And we touched upon that a bit. Like you have to get into the softer parts in order to really get that drive and motivation from someone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like the book Kahneman's Thinking Slow and Fast, or Fast and Slow, or whatever the
Right,
way he
right, right.
phrased it. Like you have two parts of the brain that are struggling, and you have to sort of get to understand that we're dealing with people, and although people can take the time and think rationally and in a logic way, they're still gonna make decisions on emotions to a great extent.
Absolutely. And how should salespeople overcome this challenge with buyers being illogical, which I think is especially important in the B2C space, because those consumer buyers behave especially illogically, but it definitely is on the B2B side as well. The more business to business space, how how can, as a salesperson selling into either of those groups, um, overcome this challenge? What's the trick there?
The first one is realizing that this is the way it is, right? People make decisions on emotions, and I need to understand what drives my buyer, what's important to my buyer. And it may be they're making the decision for, I mean, they're very environmental, so the environmental aspects of your product become very important to this individual, but maybe less so to another individual. So and I think with the internet, we have a lot of opportunities to do research, to sort of see some of these things, how
Mm-hmm.
people are writing, what they're liking. So you can make some research to understand how you could relate better to an individual. I'm not a B2C expert, so I'm not uh, I don't know if I'm the right person to give advice in that space, but I think in the B2B space, that also goes up to the corporate level, right? What do our buyers, what do they relate to? What makes them tick? Like
Mm-hmm.
our mission is to elevate the sales profession, for instance, and we sell through partners, and our partners are sales trainers and sales consultants. And they're also usually on the same mission. They also want to elevate the sales profession. And that is such a powerful relator, or a powerful connector between our company and their company, because we're on the same mission.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find a mission of your company that really aligns with what your buyers are trying to accomplish, I think that's a very strong aspect of it. And then communicate that, and be consistent in how you communicate with buyers.
Absolutely. Um, so in the fifth chapter of your book, titled "How Your Technology Stack Accelerates the Death Rate in Your Organization," it's a bold statement. What do you think? Why do you think that some tech can sometimes hurt salespeople? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the problem I see with CRM systems out there is that they were designed on these very same assumptions. So salespeople should with whom and when and why and all that, and they should just log what they've done, and then we can pull reports to see if they've done enough, to get back to see if they've been disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing in those systems that really guide the salespeople on how to actually relate to buyers and how to guide a buyer through their decision-making process. I mean, there's very rough things in there, but if the system is just asking you to log whatever you've done, you feel like a data entry. So that's the obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I see happening a lot is this spamming of people using email automation. So and I think this comes out of out of Silicon Valley, because you have a lot of startups who have a fantastic new product, and they have the entire world as their marketplace. So they want to get from zero to millions of customers. So it
Mm-hmm.
might make sense for them to spam a lot of people. Uh, but I think if you do that in the wrong way, you end up annoying a lot of people. And at least I get these emails all the time. And when they send this, and they're often very templated. So you get the same emails from different vendors who bought the same tools. And I get the seventh one say, "Hey, George, this is my seventh email. Why haven't you responded to me?" It's like, yeah, maybe because you sent me 6 stupid emails, and this is the seventh stupid email
Yeah.
that I get from you. It's like it's not helping. So that's something, and I see people copying that because these companies have a lot of money. They do a lot of marketing, and they explain how fantastic this tactic is working for them.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you are a B2B selling company and you have, I don't know, 1,000 potential clients in the world, why on earth would you start spamming them like crazy? That's just a bad tactic. So again, you have to know, you have to have the right tools for your type of selling environment that helps your salespeople be successful. And I think technology is too often seen as either as a big brother thing, like the CRMs are perceived, or as sort of some kind of silver bullet or shortcut success where the computers replace the salesperson.
Mm-hmm. Well,
None.
and just to remind everyone, you run a CRM system, specifically a sales enablement focused CRM system. Um, like what is your company doing differently that kind of separates it from the problems that you're talking about?
Yeah, so we try to add this here, explain CRM to people that the CRM, I mean, most basic form of CRM is data, right? You have a database. It's like a Rolodex, a digital Rolodex. But that's unfortunately where a lot of CRMs stop. So they just become digital graveyards of information. So what we're trying to do at Membrane is to add the how. Like, how should we go about selling? What is our way of selling? How do we codify that, including training, coaching, analytics, and all that good stuff that a manager needs, but also as a sales guy, how do I get the right content? How do I know what to do now? What do I do when I'm up against this competitor? All that stuff, get it dynamically served up to you at the right time.
Okay, awesome.
So the how to.
That makes sense. Um, what do you recommend to salespeople who want to create a scalable and systematic approach to their sales and sales processes?
Wow, the easy answer would be get Membrane, but no, but really that's what I did in my previous company. I sat down and I tried to identify the the main mistakes the salespeople did that were not successful and compare that with those who were successful. And what I found at that time was a pretty simple and one that was fairly easy to fix. And that was that the poor, uh, um, the salespeople who were not very successful, they did not relate or talk to and engage the technical people. So we sold an IT automation platform. So we could take a company from like 3% profit margins to 30% profit margins by automating a lot of the IT maintenance they were doing manually. But if you did not involve the tech people, they of course got really afraid. Like, oh my God, my company is going to throw me out because they're going to automate this stuff. So we just found that simple problem, and we 3x the win rates, triple the win rates by
You,
always engaging the tech people.
okay, okay. I had a challenge with that back when I was selling Gmail when I was at Google. It was, I was selling the Google Apps Suite, and so a lot of the times we would sell this to someone who was currently on an old janky email system like GroupWise or Lotus Notes, and so I'd be pitching to the 20 decision makers at a company, standing up at the front of the room, and invariably the hardest questions and challenges throughout the presentation would come from the Lotus Notes engineer, who is, clearly being like, well, I mean, if we make this switch, I'm out of a job, so
Yeah,
I don't like this at all. But our pitch was, so we definitely need to engage those guys and make sure, the tough pitch there, but the pitch is basically, well, it frees people up to do more interesting stuff than keeping Lotus Notes on life support. You can use your engineers that are doing that and have them do cool things. And so sometimes the guys that actually had other skills were like, oh, that'd be amazing. I'd love to take this thing and throw it in the
exactly.
garbage. But the ones that were like, this is really all I know how to do. Like they're a tough sell. So,
Yeah, exactly. I have to find something more interesting for them to do, I guess.
yeah, exactly. So how do
I don't
you
know.
oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
I don't know if I was just, did I even answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you did. I think you did. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, how do you define sales productivity in the first place? What is what does your productivity formula that you talk about look like in action?
Yeah, so the easiest one is just looking at your efficiency and multiplying that with your effectiveness. So if you first, you need to figure out how you do things in the optimal way, right? If you're doing something right, and you're doing the right things. So if you do both of those, so you're doing the right things, talking to the right people at the right time, you're understanding them, you're relating to them, you're building trust, da 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 da. Beautiful. And then you can start to speed up. But I see a lot of companies doing the opposite. They just speed up. But if then you're just multiplying your mistakes and you're not going to become very much effective. So more productive. So efficiency times effectiveness, doing the right things and doing them right.
Define efficiency and define effectiveness in that equation.
Yeah, so effectiveness, I think it was Stephen Kotler who phrased it, if I don't remember it incorrectly, that doing it right is efficiency, and doing the right thing is
Mm-hmm.
effectiveness. So once you've figured out that you're doing the right thing, then you can start doing that right or fast or in volume. Uh,
Okay, and
is that understandable?
yeah, that does make sense. Which one would you say is more important if you were going to work on one first? Which one would you do?
Well, I think you have to work on effectiveness first, because otherwise, well, that said, I'm sure there are situations where it would make sense to speed up first and then tweak. Uh, but depends on the damage. I mean, we touched on the automation of emails.
Mm-hmm.
That's a typical example of efficiency, right? Instead of, if a person can send 50 emails and now they can send 5,000 emails, they're being a lot more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
But are they being more effective? I don't know. Maybe they're getting 500 appointments now when they're sending 5,000 emails, but I wouldn't think so. I'm not sure they're getting so many more appointments because they're teaching the entire customer base that don't read your emails from me because they're all spam. So less people will open your emails and less people will respond to them and less meetings will be booked. So first you have to figure out what the right thing is to do, again, in your environment. And once you know that, you can start doing more of it. So effectiveness first, then efficiency.
Okay. Well, now I'd like to do the next section of our show today, the sales in 60 seconds. Quick questions and quick answers here. So, first question: as a sales effectiveness pioneer, your goal is to find out how technology is either hurting or helping sales productivity. What would you say are the best productivity tools for salespeople out there?
Productivities. Now we're doing two things at the same time. Messes with my head here a bit. Uh, but yeah, for effectiveness, I mean, it's all about process in my world. Make sure you're doing the right things at the right time with the right people. So buy tools like Membrane or other tools that would help you to do a playbook that you can effectively follow. For efficiency, for me, I mean, a lifesaver has been the Meet Me or Calendly type of functionality.
Mm-hmm.
That's been amazing, um, especially when you're working across different time zones.
Yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
use Calendly. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, I like to. I'd like to, give a shameless plug to Badger on the efficiency side here.
You should.
At least for field salespeople. Um, what any other productivity tools? So a calendar tool, a playbook, a sales
Yeah, and
playbook
of course,
tool.
Zoom is an obvious one. It's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. The and Yeah, what else could I mention? As you can see, I'm not a high volume guy. For me, in a B2B complex B2B sale, it's more about really tailoring the right messaging, getting to the right people. So doing things right with quality is more important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, web conferencing, calendaring apps are super. Getting to content is a big one, of course. How to quickly find the right type of information to send to a client. Uh,
What do you recommend there? At Badger, we use a spreadsheet for that one, a Google Doc spreadsheet. What do you recommend?
well, shameless plug again then. It's all built into Membrane. It serves you up the right content based on stakeholder role, where you are in the process, all of that good stuff.
Oh, okay. That's is it? That's not something that CRMs usually do, is it? Is that a unique thing you guys went after, or is that a common
Yeah, I
feature
mean,
now that I just don't know about?
yeah, I mean,
But
there are companies doing that on top of CRMs, like you have HighSpot and Seismic, and yeah, there are a bunch of providers who do a really good job on that. Our niche is B2B complex sales, long sales cycles, multiple stakeholders. So we just add all the tools that we see add value to that target group. And this is an obvious one.
okay, okay. Um, so next question. I kind of broke my sales in 60 seconds there, but I got interested in what you were saying. So
Sorry.
next sales in 60 second. What key skills do sales reps need to be successful today?
Empathy comes up first in these times, definitely, but
Mm-hmm.
always really understanding your client and being relatable and helping. That's the number one I would bring up.
Yeah, I'd add listening in there too. That's
Of
a
course. Yeah.
an obvious but probably a key one.
Mm.
What's a common mistake you see reps make in their sales process?
Ignoring the fact that there will be multiple stakeholders involved. So they're running one person in the belief that that person will make the decision because he or
Mm.
she said so. But there will always be more,
Are
and you
you the
have to
decision
engage them.
maker? Yes, I am the decision maker, but
Of course I am.
everybody's got a boss. So
Yeah, that's the main one.
yeah. Um, well, as an expert in B2B sales, are there any books besides yours, of course, that you would recommend salespeople to better understand this topic?
Yeah, there are so many books. I mean, the classic, of course, which probably everyone listening has already read, is Been Selling on the
Mm.
question techniques. Uh, I like the writing of Dave Brock. It's more of a sales management book, but I think it's really good content. Everything Dave writes on his blog is fantastic. So I would follow him. Um, yeah, and also I think not we're in the business of money, right? So understanding KPIs is really good. So cracking the sales management code is a brilliant book by Jason Jordan. Again, maybe more management than salesperson, but I think it's good for a salesperson to wrap their head around these things when it comes to numbers and KPIs and how they connect.
Well, as a actionable takeaway, I like to give people the first step that they should do at the end of the podcast. What is the first thing that a field salesperson listening today should do as their first step to rooting out deadly assumptions?
I think they should go back, look at their last sort of 10 wins and losses, and really do a deep dive in, did I make any assumptions during this sales cycle that caused me to either win or lose? Did I talk to the right people? Did I really understand what they were looking to accomplish? Did I really understand the other priorities this customer had that maybe cause them to say no or say later, and then figure out what could I have done differently? Could I have prevented that outcome? Or if it was a positive outcome, how can I make more of that happen?
Mm-hmm.
By structuring my way of selling, my playbook. And then if your way of selling is fantastic, how do you clone that to the rest of the team? And how can you get, and maybe you have a sit down with a, if you're not the top performer, have a sit down with the top performer, because sometimes if you ask the top performer what they're doing, they can't say it. But if you start asking specific questions on what they did, and how they got to yes where you maybe got to a no, you can find small nuggets in there that you can take and improve your process.
Yeah, I think sales leadership, one of the key shortcuts to being a great sales leader is to just study your top performers like they were a wild animal and you were a biologist, and
Yeah.
just document their behaviors. See what they eat, see where they sleep. Just study the animal, and then try to figure out what's special about the animals so that you can replicate it across the team, or even have them help you replicate across the team, because they're probably better at this than you are. So have them teach people how they're doing it. But you're right, they often don't know why what they're doing is special, because they're just like, yeah, I mean, of course I do it this way. Wouldn't everyone? And you're like, no one else figured it
Exactly.
out.
And what I find very interesting is when you do a win-loss, and when you get the numbers from the systems, like if you really do a loss analysis, and you start seeing things like, wow, we really lose a lot against this competitor, and you bring everyone into a room, there's always someone who says, well, I never lose against them.
Yeah. You
What do you
don't
mean?
tell customers that they suck at this and to just try that out and see that part that sucks, and everyone else is like, no, we didn't know about
Yeah, we didn't know about that. And
that.
nobody came up with the idea like, wow, that's really smart. Let's clone that. Let's make everyone do that all the
Hmm.
time. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
absolutely. That's a key one. I, uh, I give a whole talk kind of on this concept. I might have done a podcast on that already, and I forget at this point sometimes I forget what I gave presentations on, and some speaking engagement versus what I've podcasted. It's all very confusing. I think I covered this in an earlier podcast though.
Yeah.
Unclear. Well, next I'd like to summarize all the bits of knowledge that you've provided for us here today, just because people like to hear it twice and a lot of them are driving. So, in summary, the three deadly assumptions are: one, the perception that salespeople are born; two, that salespeople are super disciplined and will go after their target in a disciplined way; and three, that both salespeople and consumers are rational. So don't assume a salesperson will be great at your company just because they sold well before at a different company, which may have had different circumstances. Establish who you're selling to and how they buy, and figure out what a top performer is at your organization, what defines them. Yeah. In order to help a salesperson with their discipline, learn what motivates each one as an individual and what drives them. Don't assume it's always money. It might be something else. People make decisions based on emotion and rationalize after after they've made their decision, basically. So sales managers need to really get at these emotions to understand their salespeople and then teach them how to sell to people. Salespeople need to do research to really understand what drives their buyers. Technology can hurt salespeople because it can push people to be that disciplined seller that they aren't necessarily without the right motivation. You, and what I mean by that, you need to find the right tool for your organization, and that will unlock the value and motivate the reps to do well. Sales productivity is looking at your effectiveness and multiplying it by your efficiency. In other words, this is when you do the right thing at the right time with the right people, then you can increase your volume after you have everything in the right place. Sounds obvious, but hard to actually do.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of wrap your head around that concept. Which is, I guess, why you wrote a book about it, right?
Yeah, it sounds easy.
So, well, tell me, George, where can listeners read more about your work? Where can they reach out to you? How do they learn more?
Yeah, thanks. So the book is just out, so it's on Amazon. Stop Killing Deals. So just search for that. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so just search for my name there and connect with me. I would be happy to engage there. And membrane.com/blog is where I blog once a week. I have really good guest bloggers there as well. So if B2B sales is of interest, yeah, please subscribe to the blog.
Well, thanks, George. This has been a great episode of the Outside Sales Talk. If anyone can think of any other sales reps that would benefit from learning the stuff that George has talked about today, share the love and forward this episode on to them. Take care until next time, guys.